I'm glad that you're here. Welcome you to Porch Talk. This is your host, Alan, and we're going to start the show off with a song called Rather Low by Nick Shoulders.
Well, my eyes adjust, my joints are rusty, sheets are awful cold and dusty. Row over, folks, it must have been another night of the bend. Kick rocks, slap guitars, fool on levee, walks couches, my kingdom and nice where there's bugs in my head. 6 sad sentient, a penny saved, a penny spent to sleep at the wheel, sure beats being awake in my bed. Half all the fuel swallowed, dread the sight of alcohol. I don't know where this train stops, but I want all. Been rather low out here together. Reckon that we'll keep trying if rock bottom it never shows. You're not alone to face this storm of weather. I ain't welcome at home. I don't know about you. Double take some double stops, a double dare you, call the cops. If I were standing by here, wagon wheel again. 40 days of foggy nights withered by the city lights. I don't remember existential crisis being part of the deal. I told you once, I told you twice, I'm steeped in verse and cursed in vice. I traded my 40 acres for a mountain of pain. Goddamn hams can blind it in the promised land. Don't mind if I do declare we're as good as dead. Been rather low out here together. Reckon that we'll keep trying if rock bottom it never shows. You're not alone, a busy storm of weather. I ain't welcome at home, I don't know about you. You're not alone, a busy storm of weather. I ain't welcome at home, I don't know about you. I ain't welcome at home, I don't know about you.
Welcome you. This is your host, Alan, and glad you're here. It's another episode of Porch Talk. During this quarantine time, we are burning the phone lines out to the Ozarks. It's to catch up with a singer-songwriter, artist, Nick Shoulders, and I'm so glad to have him on. So, Nick, how you doing, brother?
Can't complain. How about you, Radio Land?
Yes, sir, man. It's good to have you on here.
It is good.
Man, just during this time, any time to be able to kind of make this kind of connection, it's just kind of it's a good getaway.
It sure is. I was just gonna say it's nice to just kind of like have a conversation outside of the ones that I normally do, because you get used to talking to strangers, and well, band stuff is all about talking to strangers. You're on the road, and that's half of what you're doing. So it's kind of cool to feel normal again and talk about music things and do music things.
Right, man. And so, man, just to spend a little time with you, Nick, just getting familiar with your music, I just want to know where it came from. And so if you can give me a backdrop, like where you're from, and what did that look like growing up?
Well, I'm originally from out west of Little Rock, Arkansas. We live kind of at the dead end of a road, and I got the benefit of having a lot of space growing up. It's a lot of logging property. It's the Ouachita Foothills, Ouachita Mountains, that is. And I had my folks, my parents weren't necessarily musical, but I've got both grandparents on all sides were singing and whatnot. I had a grandpa that recorded some country politan and kind of weird warbly gospel stuff in the 80s, and so I was around a lot of this music, but I think I mostly learned to interact with early country through my grandpa's he would bring a boombox and just sort of sing.
Yeah.
And I don't think I loved it. I kind of made fun of it and figured out how to do that vibrato and stuff. But we eventually moved up to the Ozarks when I was young and had more property up there and kind of interacted with some banjo, fiddle, old time music stuff. But mostly I kind of had these bird call whistles and yodels that I figured out by being able to whoop and holler with my neighbors. Like, I just always had this space and always had this kind of like affinity for nature. I've got more of a natural science background than anything. I grew up as a snake nerd and catching turtles and lizards and all sorts of fun stuff like that. So
We're going
really,
to get along just fine, you and I.
Yeah, I was a creepy crawler guy. I was all about that sort of thing. So, like, I like fishing, but I kind of like it when the fish bite you. So I got into, like, snakes and lizards and turtles and all that stuff. And so I was really just immersed in nature and eventually realized that this kind of skill set that I developed, the yodels and whoops and hollers and bird calls and all the weird noises that were really a product of my environment, had sort of this skill set, novel use in, like, traditional country music. And I did punk rock bands and metal bands and played mostly drums and stuff when I was young. I didn't actually pick up guitar until a few years ago, but I was a drummer and just wanted to be part of the, like, loudest, most pissed off music you could hear. And so that's what I did for ages, just kind of having this novel set of country skills behind me. And then eventually I moved out of Arkansas and started living in my van and travel, and then kind of got to know the weirdo sort of reform punk traditional music, traditional country music that is scene that exists out there, and I really sort of tapped into that and was like, well, these folks are doing stuff I like. This is hot. This is relevant. This is fun music, and I have this skill set and this background that, you know, have a place there, and I've got something to say. So I think I should pitch in on this. So I moved to New Orleans and started writing songs and trying to put a country band together 2 years ago, and well, here we are.
Right. And so, man, we'll let's back up a little bit. I want to unpack some of that with you, man. I relate completely with you. Is my mother, when I was a child, there was a rule laid out just for me that I had to unload my pockets before I would walk in the door. Because, I mean, when I was a kid, I mean, we spent time down at the creek bed. And I would put, like, frogs and little snakes and lizards in my pocket.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, before my mom got wise to it, you know, she would be doing laundry and, like, finding all these things and be like, what in the world? And so, like rule number one, okay, it's time to come in and clean up. But first, you got to unload your pockets. But, I mean, I got crickets, I got... You know, everything that I had done that day, I had in my pockets.
Mm-hmm.
And, man, I get it.
Yeah, totally. And every time I run into somebody who's like that, it's always like this funny kindred spirit moment. It's like, oh God, you're that snake kid too. But we had our property that I grew up on was it was a nice little wooded patch of kind of Ozarks timberland in the middle of a decent-sized town. You know, Fayetteville is like a small college town, and I could walk from our holler to a Confederate cemetery and a public library in the same amount of time. Like, you know, it was small town, but with this woodland thing going on, and it was a skirmish battle a skirmish field from the Battle of Fayetteville, and had these like springs and rocks and little caves and all sorts of stuff, and it was just a delight for anybody that's trying to find stuff that bites and creeps and crawls. And my mom actually, I first started doing laundry because my mom was tired of getting poison ivy from handling my clothes after I come in from the woods. So that's
right.
That was my intro. It's like, no, I'm done with this. You are washing your pants. You're washing all your stuff. I'm totally done with this.
Yeah, man. It was. It's just like that. It's like, if I want to know what Alan has done today, I just will ask him to empty his pockets. It's like, yeah, he's been fishing. He's got crickets in his pockets. But
growing up in the Ouachitas, we had crystals everywhere, so that was my problem. I was a rock hound. I picked up
man,
and weird twisted up
stuff.
But my pockets were often heavy.
Yeah, I thought I was Indiana Jones. The only difference between me and him was I wasn't afraid of snakes, cause it was, it was man, I was collecting rocks. I had the best rock collection of any 8-year-old.
Oh, I bet. I don't doubt that one little bit.
Yeah, and yeah, that was the thing, man. And so, I mean, just as you were growing up, you mentioned like your grandparents and having a bit of part of the scene. What were some of them early influences, like maybe riding in mom and dad's car or just at home, that you were listening to that kind of got you into music?
Well, like I mentioned, my parents weren't musicians, but my dad was very musical, if that makes any sense. His dad was like a multi-instrumentalist. I have his fiddle and had his guitar. And, that was hearing him really just sort of know how to carry a note and then also whistle really got me into music, I think, initially. My dad's a fantastic whistler, and as I understand it, his dad before him was an incredible whistler. And
well, I think you got the genes right there, man, because like that was one of the things. Like the first video of yours that I saw, it was on Western AF on YouTube, and it was I think it was the yodeling that was the draw to the video. But then, like, I heard the whistling, and I was like, man, like, you don't hear that. I was like, that guy's got a background. Like, they've done some things.
Yeah. I can't deny that was probably. I mean, I claim that whistling's my first instrument. I did learn how to play my teeth pretty young, but I think at about 9 years old or so, I realized I might be about as good a whistler as my dad. And I was like, all right, well, what's next? And then I heard Slim Whitman on Mars Attacks, and I just, I think I had the bug in me for traditional country stuff. Like I said, I got dragged to like Audubon ecology camp and loved it. And they had like the old counselors were playing banjos, fiddles, and like, there's stuff like that where you could hear sort of the ancestral music of the region around. But really, I was drawn to rock and roll and stuff early because it's like any small town weirdo. Most people in the South don't love that they're from the South until they kind of step outside of it and get a little more context on the world at large. And so,
absolutely,
I think I just wanted to play rock and roll when I was young, just being the loudest, most pissed off stuff you can imagine. But it took time to realize I was actually qualified for the country, and that I'd kind of just been limping along in the other thing.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I gravitate toward the narrative that you just threw out there. It's like Kennedy, the small town that I'm here in Alabama. It's like wisteria on the trees, and at 8 o'clock at night, if you haven't done what you wanted to do, you're done unless you want to go on to the next town.
Right.
And I mean, you'd have, if you blinked, you would miss it if you were riding through. And so, like, I was that same way. Like, it was always like a different context of what was locally known to, I guess, the region. It was digging a little bit deeper in music. And
totally.
it was good influences. Like, it was just like my older brother's friends, and by some good miracle, they had been exposed to some really good music that opened my eyes early, that really made me energized and wanted to be around different kind of music and be a part of it.
And there's so many of us too, of us little weirdos from any town USA that are from regions that don't reflect what we get into young, and then eventually like gravitate back towards it.
Yeah, man. And so I mean, just as you was getting up out of high school and all that, and I know you gave the synopsis early on, but your early or late teenage years, early 20s, like, was music something that you were fully pursuing, or like, what did that kind of look like for you at first? What were you trying to do?
Well, I was so deep in being like, king of the pit. Like I just like went to every hardcore show, and I had like, nothing but drums on my mind. But I wasn't doing so hot in school, and I'd missed my chance to be a scientist because I just wasn't passing any classes. So I realized that I had enough of a skill set in art and had been doing enough art stuff my whole life that I should probably try to go to art school. So I've moved to Denver for a year and a half and tried to do art school out there. And, you know, I learned a lot, but basically learned that I didn't want to be in art school.
Yeah.
And also, I went from sort of like, I'm stealing classic country off of the internet and, like, you know, listen to my grandpa's tapes and, you know, whistle and play harmonica, but, like, I wasn't really interested in making traditional music per se. And then moving to Denver, I got so miserably homesick so quickly. I never lived in a town, like, there are more people in Denver than the whole state of Arkansas. So I went from, like, zero to, oh, God, I hate this. And so I bought a banjo and started, like, learning clawhammer and really traditional stuff. I drifted to a lot of Ozark old-time music. There's a lot of really specific old-time traditions that are connected to kind of the Appalachian heritage of the settlement of the Ozarks, also mixed in with some interesting localities and history that just, you know, make this a unique music form anyway. So, like, I got into that Ozark stuff, and then that eventually kind of led me to realize, like, you know, I've been learning how to do these yelp and holler break note things. I was a Hank Williams impersonator by 17. You know, like, I figured out all these ways to to yelp and whoop and holler and do the yodely stuff, but I suddenly realized I had been completely ignoring the music from my family, my grandparents, and everything that I had access to. And that's from more of a deep south. Like, my family's been in Arkansas since 1850, but down at the deep part of the state, like almost Louisiana. And they all sing with that deep south vibrato and all that projection and stuff. And I realized that I had basically just missed out on that entirely. So I started, like, really pouring myself into that style of singing in my mid-20s, and that's kind of led up to now. But it took a minute to figure out that's what I was missing out on.
Yeah, man. Like, I totally relate to that. Like, coming from Kennedy, I did community college and I worked for a year and I was just completely dissatisfied with everything, and so I thought I would give college another shot. And I went down to the University of Mobile and I was doing some cultural and religious studies, and I had music as a minor. And Mobile times my county, it would be like my county population made over maybe 10,000 times, you know.
Yeah.
And I felt like a really big fish musically in my area. I had, you know, I played every week, you know, whatever I was doing, like I felt confident there. And then I go to Mobile and I get in this music program and I feel like I am the smallest fish in the biggest pond. I feel like I'm in the ocean.
No, totally. That'll do it, because I didn't really pursue any music in Denver at all. Like, I was totally scared out of it.
And it totally backed me down. I was like, I'm going to be in the choir, and I'm just going to sit back, and I'm just going to watch, and I'm just going to see what I can learn. I was like, I feel just like I'm in the wrong place. I don't know how I even was allowed to be here.
That's how I feel. I think it was really, I was ready. It was an aspiration to go to Denver, and I think it also just felt like the closest relevant city. It's like, oh yeah, that's going out west. Yeah, Denver. You know, that's crazy far away. And, it just ended up bumming me out. But I moved straight back to Arkansas after being out there not that long, and I just sort of hung out for a few years. I ended up getting picked up as a harmonica player, banjo player for Sean James for a minute when he was getting started. And then
no way.
Yeah, that was one of my early gigs. And
yeah, he's been on the show.
Oh, no kidding. Yeah, Sean's a great dude. It's funny kind of how it all panned out, because I was in his band and, you know, helping really at the very, very beginning when things were getting started. And I was in there for about 2 years, and he and I finally, like, parted ways where I just needed to be in my own kind of zone, because I didn't sing in that band. I didn't participate with any of the songwriting. I was a backing player, and I was ready to do that at first, and I think that's valuable for a lot of people. Like, I'm born a backing player. I started as a drummer. I did that first and foremost, and I think that like really helps you interact with the band long term. But I was starting to think about what I wanted to actually put out music-wise and do more of my own thing. So I went from like being in a bunch of thrash bands in Arkansas and like going on tour with Sean to solely living in my van for 2.5 years and lived out west for a bit. And, sold art and busked on the streets and whatnot. Like I was playing mostly on the streets and singing for a solid year and a half, like not booking any shows, not playing in clubs or venues, just playing busking. And had, the year before that, been touring in an RV around the country and in Europe. So I went from kind of having like a cushy spot in somebody else's band to totally starting at square one. So that's a weird experience, but it was fun in retrospect.
Yeah, man, that's crazy. And like, man, I would like to spend just a little bit more time right there with busking. Just for listeners, like, a lot of people may not be familiar with what busking is. So just give us a better, like, what does that look like to the day to day? I mean, you're playing the streets.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely, you strategize with your parking. Like, okay, if I'm parked here for $2 an hour, I've got to make $10 to be able to make any money today. And so then you walk down with your equipment, rain or shine or whatever, and find a spot. Hopefully it's not taken. And this is in like a high foot traffic kind of zone, places people shop and whatnot. You've all seen them.
Yeah.
And then you hope you don't have anybody that's better than you or louder and more annoying than you nearby. And then you just start playing. And I really think I've happened into a pretty golden spot in terms of influences. Because right as I got the van, I started traveling and playing on the street more. I also had that realization that I was talking about that, I had this music in my family, these singers that were alive and that I had sung with and been around my whole life that had this connection to this very, very old gospel singing technique.
Yeah.
Of just using all that vibrato and underpitch and stuff. And I was like, wait, what am I doing? Like, this is how you get heard. These things are from before microphones because you had to be heard across a huge room.
Right.
So basically, I started busking and realizing that about the singing and, like, really kind of redesigned how I had been approaching music to be able to project across a busy street or, like, a crowded street corner. And, I went all over the West. I was in all the cities and all the weird marketplaces and bar strips and stuff. And I've gotten kicked out of places and welcome others. There's just a million ways the busking can go well or badly. But
I'm
I
telling
really
you.
think I happened into the culture in New Orleans because that's where like people make a living. Also, playing the streets in New Orleans. And I was like, wait, this is something different. Like all these people are professionals, but they're like down to play on the street. It's not just like people selling crystals and like singing Tom Petty songs or whatever. Like these folks are really like into it. So that was really where I felt like I found a home, was in that sort of busking dance crossover culture in New Orleans.
Yeah, man. I'm just thinking about that, just unpacking that a little bit, just finding that rhythm. And like you talking about finding your sound. And so at what part in your life were you at, like, toward doing your own songwriting and forming what you have going on now?
Well, I was, like I mentioned, I've been in a million loud bands, and I was doing mostly that. And, I couldn't play guitar in standard. I was playing like open C slide guitar, D-beat, like, yelling noise bands.
Yeah.
And so when I started busking, that was about 2 years. And I guess towards the end of my busking van career, my grandma in Little Rock, she had an accident and burned her feet really bad. So I moved back to Little Rock for like 9 months and helped with my grandma and was kind of just immersed back in all that old music and being in Little Rock where my family's been for a few generations and like kind of being back in the actual deep south. I think I like between a combination of boredom and influence started writing stuff that eventually became like early OK Crawdad. And I guess that would have been the spring of 2017. So really, I only picked up a guitar and played it in standard and figured out how to write these sorts of songs like 3 years ago. Like I went straight from like not doing any of this stuff to really going for it. And it's been remarkable how quickly it seemed to pick up. But there was a lot of hard work that went in before that. It's not like I just like happened on country music and was like, oh yeah, cool, I'm gonna do
Yeah.
this. Like I've been reluctant to pick up this sound in a way because I felt like I'd been so drawn to other things. But this is really what I feel like I owe to myself to play because it's what I'm actually qualified to do.
Right, man. I'll tell you the big kick about it. I believe, this is just me personally, is, and now just sitting down and hearing a little bit of the story, is I love the blues, man. Like, I'm in Alabama and I got these old hill country blue players from the Delta and Mississippi, and I'm surrounded in these pines by this great music heritage, and you are too. Especially when you get down there in New Orleans and you're just north of it in Fayetteville. And like, I think what is most addictive about your sound, at least for me, is the fact that it comes from somewhere. And the moment you hear it, it's representative of something. And you can immediately put your finger on it. And that's the importance of it. To me, is like, I've thoroughly enjoyed, like, since I've found your music, listening to it, because I can put my finger on it. Like, I know where that comes from. I was like,
Right.
I relate, like, that comes from this part of America, and it makes me think of that, and I'm proud of that heritage. Like, you found the stamp.
Right. It stamped me first,
Yeah.
I'm a product of my environment in a very literal way, and I think that's maybe what. I think the term country music's a little bit inaccurate for the genre, but it does when you put it that way in terms of where it actually physically comes from. I'm carrying all of this without meaning to or knowing how to stop it. I am just fully a product of my environment.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that's what you walked away from it with, because that's really kind of what the point of it all is. There's a bunch of trappings around it, but at the core, it's that landscape can leave an indelible imprint on people's the way they sing, the way they think, the way everything happens for them. And I think there's less and less of that to an extent in music, and so
I agree.
I feel a little alien sometimes, but it's nice to still be out here doing what people have been doing for a long time.
Let's just talk a little bit about today, man. Like, OK Crawdad and what you have going on, maybe apart from that. Let's get a landscape for that. So, we're in quarantine right now, and so I guess go back to early 2020 or late 2019, and let's talk a little bit about that and how that's kind of shaped.
Well, yeah, I've been accused of being a gloomer, prepper. I'm a space science. So when I see fragile systems, I just get freaked out. So I've kind of been doing something to the extent of, we have to get this album out before something terrible happens, for most of the fall leading up to 2020. And no one told me this because I'm not good at this stuff. I'm a one-man operation. I don't have any professional experience or grounding in the industry. So no one's supposed to release a record in December.
Right.
And I didn't know that. So I just wanted the record out basically because I did a demo in 2017, EP in 2018. So 2019 had to have the full-length record, the first record,
Yeah.
So I put it out in December and immediately was sort of floored and really humbled by the response. People were into it, and it just was picking up, and it suddenly wasn't incredibly hard to book shows. And I was, I've had basically was able to book my entire summer into the fall over the course of early 2020, and I had, I would have been in Fort Collins last night, driving through Oklahoma today on tour, but that's obviously not happening. And has stuff planned for Australia this summer, which may not happen, and was supposed to play all over the East Coast and fly out to California in June. There's all sorts of cool stuff, and I hope some of it still happens later in the year, but really it was just booking and planning, and then this all, of course, happened, and I guess I don't want to make any gloomy projections about New Orleans, because I dearly love New Orleans, but the place doesn't handle disasters well. It's sort of historically proven, and I couldn't really be the transplant there, taking resources from older folks who might need it. So I opted to exercise my ability as a Archie living one state north and just scuttle up to the mountains and write it out. And it's felt like the right decision, but it's just been really it's been beyond surreal, kind of watching a career start. I mean, it is what it feels like. People are paying attention, the music's doing well, and that's something I couldn't have imagined a few months ago, that it would actually work. And and just know that that's all happening sort of in this vacuum, because I don't know when I can on the road, and I don't know what it all kind of means, but it's so encouraging to see people getting something out of the music when times are weird. Like, I've been getting so many encouraging responses that it's helping folks, and that just feels so good and so surreal that I can't do what I do best, I think, which is perform and play and travel around. And I think that's really just been the strangest part about the today, is that, you know, things are working, but I'm not actually working. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Hoping that you keep seeing some response off of that, especially during this time. I know it's got to be disheartening, you know. And right now but it leaves a void to think about different creative outlets, and people are doing Instagram lives, Facebook lives. But I mean, that isn't what you want to do, because like, I feel like, just from what I've seen from recordings and live videos, it's like seeing you live. It's just, that's where you want it. That's where it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a joke, and it's kind of true. But yeah, I try to use the tagline that I'm here to put the try in country, and I feel like to see that is actually, you know, the proof's in the live show. Like, we care a lot. You know, I think I've been able to cobble together an incredible band. My bass player that sings harmonies, Grant, he's also from the same town in Arkansas, and we both ended up in New Orleans at the same time. So like, there's more than just kind of like a country band you're seeing up there. Like, there's a lot of context to it, and I feel like that live show, we can't replace that for anybody. Like, all these folks that are missing out on getting to play live, every person like me out there that's also sitting on their hands and wondering if they're ever going to tour again, like, that's really what makes this music for people. Like, you can't get what you need out of this from the internet. Like, I am all about people just doing what they're going to do at shows, whether it means like crossing your arms and standing in the back or drinking your way through it. But partner dancing is really what brought me into this style of country and brought me into New Orleans. And I think partner dancing is going to save rock and roll. And I feel funny playing through a cell phone, and I can't hear any boots scooting around on concrete or see anybody getting twirled. Or, you know, there's just not the same participatory sort of reaction. And I know everyone's feeling that, but I think people from New Orleans that are from that scene and used to this dancing thing have got to be extra deflated, because we're used to being able to go out 5 nights a week and see your friends play if you wanted to.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And that's wild, man. Like, that's the first time I've heard it put back this way, is just being on the other side of the live video. It's like, I didn't even think about that, Nick. And so, like, you're used to hearing the crowd responding, and now you're just playing to a telephone.
Oh, it's utterly bizarre just seeing that little screen there, and you're like, okay, well, I'm assuming that somebody's watching. It's like, I guess this is working. But yeah. It's a weird, you know, I'll be honest, like, it's pretty, it was pretty jarring, the first streaming thing I did, because I was like, well, that was just weird. It was just extra weird to do that. And it felt good for a second. I got to, like, crack jokes and, like, you know, sort of screw around, but I realized I wasn't hearing any laughs and there wasn't any response. It was just sort of me in this room, and it just felt so weird.
It is, man. Like, I think about that, like, when I'm making promo videos for things. It's like, when you go back and look at the edit, and right before you're about to post it, it's like, you'll laugh, but I wonder if anybody else is laughing. But then you're live, and you're telling the joke, and be like, well, that normally is cool, but I don't know what anybody is doing.
Yeah, it's too weird. It's way too weird.
Yeah, man. I want to talk to you a little about influence today, man. Who are you listening to right now?
Ooh, well, okay, so I go back and forth between being heavily in music and heavily in radio, but I've been listening to a lot of podcasts.
Yeah, do that.
There's this episode I'm trying to get people to listen to of this show called The Anthropocene Reviewed. And it's this guy that does the human experience on a 5-star scale.
Yeah.
So it's like Taco Bell breakfast, love at first sight, 1 to 5 stars.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he does basically end of the world paranoia on a 1 to 5 scale, and it's one of the most comforting pieces of radio I've heard in a while. It really made me feel a lot better about the situation and get a couple good laughs in, because
Awesome.
as somebody who thinks way too much about this stuff anyway, I don't want to be right. I've never wanted to be on the that actually happened side of being afraid of bad things.
Yeah, ain't it weird living in history?
Yeah, I know. See, I'm stepping over periods and spaces here. Like, we're in the books as they're being written, and it's a weird feeling.
Yeah.
But in music, though, I was turned on to this really cool group of Hawaiian singers who I am just straight up not going to try to pronounce, that my friend Calais got me into, and they're like, it's the same kind of warbling, high break sort of sound that you hear in a lot of singing traditions world over, but it's got these echoes that sound like they made their way in and out of American country music. And of course, like the steel guitar in American country music, like that's a descendant of a Hawaiian instrument. So it's just interesting to hear these tangential connections between Hawaiian traditional and American country music.
Yeah, man. I tell you what, it's cool talking to you, Nick, and just hearing you talk about the different genres and like what you take from them. And then I think about what you do, and you preserve it in what you do.
Well, thanks.
Because
I'm not any good at anything else.
Nah, I mean, that's just it. Just from this whole time of talking with you, is like you want to talk about how the preservation of the sound of the voice or the whistle or whatever makes that style genre right. And then the preservation of it, man. It's that's refreshing, man.
Well, and I think that speaks to not just sort of like an attitude about music and place where I feel Alabama and Arkansas and Mississippi all kind of operate on this bottom rung sort of deal with how we're perceived, and I think that Arkansas, especially, people don't know anything about Arkansas. I think a lot of people think it's near the Dakotas because the unfortunate fact is Anglo-Americans pronounce Kansas as Kansas.
Right.
And so there's Kansas, and so people think we're part of the Great Plains. But I just feel like I've had a weird job to sort of be a cultural liaison to an extent of this place that's poorly understood and not many people leave. And it kind of comes from this natural science background where I feel like preservation and conservation they should be natural aspects of the conversation. They don't have to be aspirational. It should just be a reflex,
Yeah.
And that should apply to music and pretty much anything else that's worth preserving. There's things worth keeping and there's things worth not. But I think that there's plenty that's worth keeping about traditional country music. That's just it's not like it's too hard. It's just we haven't quite gotten there. And I think I'm glad to be part of the solution, I guess.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I back that. And so, just, I guess, kind of back on it, just a little bit more about the influence, and I guess just today with your songwriting. And with maybe just some of the songs that we're going to share here is, where does it come from, like, to talk about your primary instrument a little bit? Or just maybe what the process looks like. Does it come from a bird call at first, or where's it come from?
Yeah. So the whistling and the warbling and stuff, I guess I should back up with sort of the mechanical aspect of any song I write, is that I really get melodies stuck in my head first from whistling, and I figured out this kind of break octave whistle that sort of sounds like a yodel. So I'll get these little ditties stuck in my head, and then I'll take that ditty and stretch it out, and then I'll put that to a guitar. And I never really learned to play guitar like a normal Americana country songwriter. I'm a drummer, so I just boom chuck it. It's like play like a washboard.
Yeah, you got a totally different mind about it.
Yeah, that's just ignorance. So I just do this boom chuck behind it, and I pick those ditties, and the ditties turn into gibberish, and then eventually I'll fit a song around it. But usually I've got some kind of little phrase, a little something maybe that I got in a heated moment and said something I thought was halfway clever, or somebody said something halfway clever to me and it stuck. But there's usually little phrases, little things that are floating around up there, and I pull that into the gibberish, and then that becomes a song. But really, it kind of does start with the whistling. Like when I'm just bored and walking around, or thumbing around on the guitar, I'll definitely whistle before I hum.
Yeah.
And all this stuff is melody first, lyrical content later usually. So that's kind of the mechanical nuts and bolts of it. Is that I'm really just drawing this stuff out of random inspiration.
Yeah, cool, man. That's cool. I just been having conversations over the past couple of days. We've been doing like a Porch Talk quarantine song challenge, and
Cool.
Been I was like, and one thing that came to my mind that normally wouldn't, but is like it's a primary instrument over a secondary, and I heard it. It was REM a couple of days on some Sirius radio channel where I just heard like a clip of an interview, and the front man talked about the importance of it was important for all of us to be able to write on instruments that weren't natural to us so that we wouldn't get into a rut to where we would always sound exactly the same.
Oh, that's brilliant. Well, I accidentally did that.
Yeah.
Damn, that's super smart. Yeah, I think that it is totally true of my guitar playing. I can't even bar a chord, so I'm definitely stuck in like 3 keys and 3 capos, and that's all I got. But man, yeah, it's a cool thought.
Yeah, man, and I thought about that, and so like right now it's like guitar is my primary, and I have I'm saying keyboard is my secondary, but I'm limited because it's just like a little Kai 36 key kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like for me to go to my beat laboratory.
Nice. That's big
yeah. Though. But it does, like when I flesh things out and I can hear it on keys, you can hear things differently on the keys than you do on guitar, and you can flesh things out.
Right, and I feel like what I've been writing so far in quarantine, I've caught myself suddenly like taking a stab at fingerstyle guitar and having more of these like sort of almost piano-esque, the walking bass American primitive sounding like guitar stuff, and that's definitely not what I'm good at playing. It's what I'm like trying to eke out every time I pick up guitar. It gets a little less terrible, but I've been finding myself singing over that and trying to sing over that, and it's been a nice new hill to climb where I feel like there's been some cool melodies and stuff coming out of screwing around on guitar that way, and it's pretty much new to me. So I see what you're saying, that there is some sort of like weird sort of uncanny light that you can uncover when you're just making your way through an instrument.
Yeah, it's just like a totally different presentation of how music works.
Yeah, absolutely. Which I'm no expert on, but
me either.
I gotta say that
that's about as deep as I can go.
I was gonna say something that is not just something that I like can't pursue because I'm too busy doing other stuff. Like it's really time. I'm sure a lot of people have had nothing but time, and yet I've got 2 or like I'm gonna half maybe out of it. it's teaching me something about process too, where I've been able to stagger most of my songs over the course of months that I'm writing and putting them together, and then I bring them to the band, and then eventually we record them. Whereas now it's just me and the clock. I'm learning how to actually make myself write, because otherwise it's just it's something I wait, and I'm not just going to wait around on this mountain to get struck by lightning forever. So I need to actually kind of make myself like time to set aside for writing. So this has been a lesson in discipline, amongst other things.
How y'all hanging in there? We're going to spend a little bit more time on critical review, on just rough drafts on songwriting.
I'm really glad I belong to the group of songwriters I do, and now we did this before to an extent, but now it's definitely like become more regular for me to send drafts of these songs on voice memo to my buddies and like get stuff back from them and whatnot. I've been working on this one song that's sort of I don't know if you've listened to that Snakes and Waterfalls one enough to know anything about the lyrical content, but it's sort of like an addendum expansion on a lot of the themes there, and happening upon this canal that's being dug at the Battle of Vicksburg, where my great-great-great-grandfather was, supposedly starving and swam across the river when the town fell and everything like that. But I found this place where they had been building this canal, and his unit had attacked this group working on it, and it was just a very dark, weird thing to confront. It's down in this cotton bottom with like levees all around it, and there's Native American mounds that are, just a few miles down the road, and I was just like, this is such a terrible place that it's what I have to drive through to confront this part of myself and then get back down to New Orleans. And I basically got back down and immediately had to pack up and, get out because of quarantine conditions. So I went from, driving through Louisiana, coming from a funeral to a pandemic to back to Arkansas. So it's been a whirlwind bit, and the trite advice I always get out of that is, well, at least you might get a song out of it, and at least it's true to this. But, there's a lot to confront, and I think nothing but time is really the only way I'm going to get it done. So I'm grateful for it in that respect, I guess.
Absolutely, man. And some of the songs that I've been writing lately is been things that happened 10 years ago.
Oh, man.
I just had time to kind of like process and be like, I know what it meant then, and now I look back and I was like, I got a totally different perspective.
Right, and that's what's kind of brilliant and crazy and scary about these things. They're like this weird time capsules. Like sometimes a song is written, at least for me, and it's a matter of the fact that you're not actually going to write it for years. I've had a couple of those where I knew that song was done. It was just going to take the challenge of sitting down and writing it, but it was going to be hard, or it was going to hurt. It was going to be scary in a lot of ways, whichever way it was.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing how that strikes. It really is. And I would say that, kind of what to expand on earlier, just be gentle on your time. Like, don't try and force anything out, because then it stops being fun. And I'm just trying to keep this aspect of life still fun, because Lord knows we might be looking at the future where I'm like driving around on the back of my truck bed with a loudspeaker playing to people on back roads because we can't gather.
Yeah, right.
Who knows what this looks like long term? So I mean, I'm trying to still find joy in music, and forcing myself to write songs is part of that right now. But maybe we'll get there.
Yeah, man. Well, just to walk the thing on out the door, Nick, thank you so much for taking the time. Just for those listening, ways to find you on social media and to connect, and what maybe to look for in the next couple of weeks or months.
Yeah, I'm all over the World Wide Web. You mentioned YouTube and all that. I've definitely got my fair share of those, but Instagram, I'd say, is the most active place for me, followed closely by Facebook. Got a website in the works, and that's going to have more of my art and interactive stuff on it, but it's currently just kind of a link to everything else. But I've got an art Instagram. I've got a regular music Instagram that's very regularly updated, and where I do the live streams and stuff. But I think more than anything, just expect me to keep coming on there and singing songs periodically, and I don't know. I was hoping to record this spring, but that's probably not going to happen. And I would like to be able to sell merch, but I had to split from New Orleans. My lungs collapsed twice when I was younger, so I don't really screw around with upper respiratory pandemic plague kind of things. So I got the hell out of New Orleans for a variety of reasons, but one of them being I'm at least assuming I'm some sort of preconditioned susceptible person. So I left all my merch behind. I'm going to be able to sell that stuff eventually. So I guess all I would say is keep an eye out in a few weeks, and hopefully I'll be back down there and I can start, throwing shirts and CDs and tapes and stuff back out in the world. But my friend who I make tapes with, he just sold out of the last of his cassettes of both records, and I've got a huge crate of them down there and can't touch them. So all I would ask is a little patience. I'll be able to be back on the World Wide Web selling stuff sooner than later. Yeah,
man. Well, cool. Anything else to add or subtract before we walk this on out the door?
Nothing I can think of. If you want to hear more New Orleans bands I'm affiliated with, I made a Spotify playlist called Un-Americana, and I would just suggest listening to my friends. I'm just a face amongst some very talented people.
Yeah, man. All right, Nick. Thank you so much for taking the time, man. It's been a pleasure.
Man, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me on. Seriously.
Yes, sir. News and notes. Hey, I'm glad that you're here. Thank you so much for listening to Porch Talk. If you haven't done so already, I would ask that you would rate and review the show on whatever platform it is that you listen to on. We are on the YouTubes, the Facebooks, Instagrams, and Twitters. You can find us there. All things good, related and unrelated to the show. Now, going to walk this thing on out the door with a song by Nick Shoulders and OK Crawdad. This is called Mississippi. Getting on out of here. Peace out.
Creole Queen.